The bladder senna, or Colutea arborescens, is a shrub with yellow flowers that grows in Provence and southern Europe. In our area, it flowers from May to August on the rocky, calcareous and sunny hillsides. It's mostly found in clearings and on the margins between the garrigue and forests of downy oak or holm oak. It grows on the Mediterranean perimeter along with the spiny greenweed, Genista scorpius, and the non-spiny greenweed, Genista cinerea. The structure of their yellow flowers indicates that they belong to the same Leguminosae or pea family. The bladder senna will grow to 2 to 3 meters in height, and flowering continues as the pods develop. The Largest Bleu, Iolana iolas, is the largest of the blues of Europe. In France, it is completely dependent on the bladder senna for egg-laying and as a food source, not only for the caterpillar, but also the butterfly itself. The first males hatch from the end of April. In the morning, the butterflies warm up and drink from the flowers of their only host plant. From 11 o'clock, the males patrol around the host plants in search of females and briefly chase off other males. And from time to time, they top up their energy. Close by, a swarm of bees has built several tiers of wax. Other insects are also attracted by the bladder senna nectar. The carpenter bee is one of the most important pollinators of this shrub. This beautiful butterfly, with an average wingspan of 4 centimeters, is very localized in small populations. It flies in a single generation from the end of April to June. In the lower leaves, a well-camouflaged spider makes its way towards the flowers, but not for the nectar. The attack is sudden, and the male doesn't stand a chance. Another male approaches, attracted by the nectar, and doesn't notice the busy predator. A female hatches on a beautiful morning around 11 o'clock. She walks over to a stone and spreads her wings. The upper sides of the female's wings are violet blue with a wide dark brown edge, whereas those of the males are brilliant blue and the wing veins are paler. The forewings are decorated with black spots running almost parallel with the edges and are the same in both sexes. Once her wings are working, the female flies away from the host plant and rests. After 4 hours, the female makes her way to the tip of a twig some 4 meters from the host plant, head down and abdomen pointing up between her closed wings. A male, making his tour of inspection, approaches the female, already easily visible, but he doesn't seem to spot her. 20 minutes later, the female bends her abdomen from between the closed wings to make it more obvious. She bends and stretches it several times. But this time, a patrolling male cautiously flies zigzagging above the vegetation in the female's direction and spots her. While the male tries to mate, the female flies off, the male in hot pursuit. Then they land on a small bladder senna where they finally mate. Here, in the back country of the Var, where it is stonier and more arid, a new female has no chance of mating thanks to the bad spell of weather. And as soon as the sun comes out, she displays herself amongst the foliage, wings open. When a patrolling male approaches, she's the one that flies off to meet him. Together, they fly in circles above the foliage, then settle side by side on a branch. The male tries his luck, but the female escapes. The male chases after her. The courtship flight follows. Then the two butterflies finally rest on a bush where they mate. Another male disturbs the couple, without success. After an hour, the butterflies separate. The female is the first to fly off. And drinks for the first time. Already the female is ready to lay her eggs. Once satisfied, she begins to place her eggs one by one in the calyx of the flowers. As well as the largest of the blues, the smallest blue, the little blue Cupido minimus, lays its eggs mostly on the calyx of bladder senna flowers. The round, cream-coloured eggs are easily distinguished from those of the Largest Bleu, which are white, round, flattened and dotted with small bumps. The holly blue also sometimes chooses the bladder senna on which to lay its eggs. This butterfly flies from the beginning of March, and the caterpillars develop before the Largest Bleu caterpillars hatch. In their last stage, the holly blue caterpillars hungrily devour flowers and pods, becoming formidable competitors for the Largest Bleu. Some years, the bladder senna is seriously infected with aphids, making it impossible for the female Largest Bleus to lay their eggs there. Several days later, the typical bladder senna pods form. The calyx of the pod is her favourite place to lay an egg, thus increasing the caterpillar's chance of survival. On hatching, it will be close to its only food source, the seeds contained within the pods. The already fertilized females refuse the other male's advances. This male persists, without success. By June, the pods have grown a lot. The ones exposed to the sun turn a rose-coloured hue. Sometimes an egg is laid on the pod itself. But the eggs are laid preferentially on the pod calyx, where they are better protected from the elements and from predators. After about 10 days, an egg hatches. On hatching, this tiny Largest Bleu caterpillar meets an opponent from the moth species of the family Tortricidae, Grapholita nebritana. The caterpillar goes in search of a spot where it can penetrate the pod. It moves towards the middle, next to the vein, and it's at this point where the seeds form inside the pod. It takes more than an hour before it makes an opening. Then, once inside, it immediately seals the opening by weaving a silken thread. Apparently, it's not the only inhabitant of the pod. There is already another occupant, Iolas incanella, hiding here doubly protected at the first larval stage. The moth needs to make it understood that this seed is already occupied. Various moth species lay their eggs on the bladder senna, and their caterpillars compete directly for food with the Largest Bleu. When the pod is occupied by other caterpillar species of a much more advanced stage, the Largest Bleu caterpillar has to leave and find another pod on which to feed. But what a dangerous adventure! The pods of bladder senna growing in the shade stay fresh for longer. One could easily believe that the caterpillars are well protected in the pods, and yet specific parasites detect the caterpillar's whereabouts in these hiding places. This parasitic wasp, of the genus Glaucopsyche punctures a half-moon-shaped hole in a pod containing a pyrale moth. The pyrale tries to repair the hole, but in vain. Just as the hole is nearly closed, the wasp penetrates the pod. The moth slips away by falling, but suddenly the parasite attacks the moth at the bottom of the pod and lays an egg inside its body. Then the pyrale rushes to the top and inspects the hole. At the same time, the wasp moves up and makes an exit through the hole in search of other victims. The flattened pods indicate the presence of Tortricidae. The pyrale and Tortricidae caterpillars weave silken threads inside the pods and foul them with their excrement, thus weakening the development of the Largest Bleu caterpillars. Along this forest path, a parasitoid wasp, Anisobus cephalotus, is searching for young caterpillars of the Largest Bleu. Using its antennae, this specialist detects caterpillars inside the pod. It is completely dependent on these caterpillars for its reproduction. On finding a caterpillar, the parasitoid bites a circular hole. It makes its way inside and parasitizes the caterpillar by injecting an egg. After about 2 minutes, Anisobus cephalotus leaves the pod in search of other victims. The larva of the parasitoid develops in the body of the caterpillar, which will then die after its transformation into a chrysalis, and the parasitoid larva will hibernate inside the empty skin of its host. The holes created by each type of parasitoids are easily distinguished: round, created by Anisobus cephalotus, and half-moon-shaped by Glaucopsyche. Furthermore, grasshoppers can also represent yet another kind of danger. They munch large holes in the pods, feeding on the seeds and sometimes the pods themselves. Because the Largest Bleu caterpillars live in a closed and narrow place, they weave silken thread around their excrement in the middle of the pod in order to contain it. It is therefore possible, like here, to identify old pods which have been inhabited by iolas caterpillars. The caterpillar rests just before molting. Then the next day it begins. Here the process is accelerated. The respiratory channels and organs are also shed during the molt, seen in the form of a white line running down each side. The larvae of Bruchophagus collutii, a very small wasp, 2 millimeters in size, represent another consumer of these seeds. The female injects her eggs directly into the seeds, through the shell of the pod, piercing through with the help of an ovipositor. By eating this seed, the little pyrale escapes the jaws of the Largest Bleu caterpillar. The caterpillar leaves the pod either when there are insufficient fresh seeds or when there is too much excrement, most often during the night, and goes in search of another pod. And must find a way in before quickly closing it up. During the journey, the caterpillar may be spotted by ants, which are attracted by the melliferous gland and will follow it. Here, several ants of the species Lasius imaginatus. This caterpillar-ant interaction is hardly known about. If a pod is severely attacked by grasshoppers, and the Largest Bleu caterpillar has survived, it is impossible for it to repair such a large breach through which predators could enter. It therefore has to leave in search of a safer pod. Moreover, it is easier for the ants to find them. An ant, Lasius niger, inspects the pod and finds an Largest Bleu caterpillar feeding inside a damaged pod. The ants go crazy for the drop of sweet secretion that comes from the caterpillar's melliferous gland. The ant touches the gland again in the hope of triggering a new secretion. The caterpillar in this damaged pod uses the ant's protection against any inevitable predators. The pod's shell steadily dries out over several weeks and becomes paler in colour. Here the Tortricida caterpillar is victim of a spider, Lepidoptera mutiloides, which looks just like an ant. Only the empty eggshells remain by the beginning of the summer. At the end of June, the mature caterpillars leave the pods in search of somewhere suitable to undergo the change to a chrysalis. The caterpillar is perfectly camouflaged, under a pile of little stones, carefully bound up in silken thread, which gives it a support on which to attach itself and where it is protected from the cold and damp of the winter months. For 2 days it doesn't move. Then the transformation into a chrysalis begins, here accelerated 4 times. Within a few hours, the chrysalis changes colour and hardens. Towards the end of summer, the seeds, now dry and black, fall to the foot of the mother plant. The last pods are shaken off by the strong autumn wind. The seeds pop out of the lower open end of the pod. The species hibernates as a chrysalis, well protected from the cold, between the stones of the rocky soil. During their hibernation, while the countryside is covered in a layer of snow, the chrysalises survive long periods of frost. Mid-April, and a male hatches. At this stage, the proboscis is formed from two ducts, which will eventually weld together. It refuels on energy and starts its new life. Although the bladder senna is originally from this region, it is unfortunately becoming more and more uncommon and very localized. One of the reasons for the decline of this shrub is the excessive strimming of the forest tracks. Being totally dependent on this shrub, this beautiful butterfly is very vulnerable. Therefore, it is essential to pay attention to its safeguard. Currently, the Largest Bleu is represented at a national level for threatened species. The future of the Largest Bleu would be less under threat if the bladder senna was to be protected in the places where populations of the Largest Bleu exist.